Now, we've all likely had that great idea or passion project that, didn't pan out and could be called a failure. But it's after the big failures that we're often left questioning ourselves, our weaknesses, and sometimes just feeling downright defeated. Entrepreneurs know this intimately, as many as 9 out of 10 will fail, according to Forbes magazine. Now, last year, I became one of those 9 failures for my second company. And I remember the moment like it was yesterday, the sights and smells of the room, but mostly the feeling of being alone and isolated. And it shook me to my core. I also realized that it was really frustrating because the support of the ecosystem seemed to have dried up after I stopped being successful. So today, I want to share with you 3 important stories from my understanding of failure, in how entrepreneurs are forced to confront themselves in order to make sense of things. First is to lean into your emotions. Second is to get clear on your language. And third is to be intentional in how we learn. Now, I've spent over a year researching through academic papers and interviews and books about how people rise after failure. And I wasn't alone in asking the how question, because it's really elusive. And it worries me because it means that maybe we're failing up to 90% of the entrepreneurs and the people behind the companies that are started. Emotions are ground zero for startup failure. And when I came to the realization that I was going to fail, and what I put my heart, soul, and time into was no more, all I wanted to do was hide away and not feel a thing. And that little voice in your head gets really loud saying, you're not good enough, you're not good enough. And so you have to really deal with that. So the first step is to lean into your emotions. And we're not taught how, so it can be really hard. Researcher Brene Brown shares that this is the rumbling with your emotions. It first starts with recognizing you feel something. And second, it leads to the fact that you have to be curious about what's happening. As I got curious about emotions, it led me to the work of Dr. Alan Watkins. Now, he suggests that it's our physiology that drives our emotions, which in turn drives our thoughts and our feelings. So challenging ourselves and confronting things, or controlling our physiology rather, through things like box breathing and meditation, allow us to actually change our behaviors at the root. So a question to the audience, how many of you have ever answered the question, how do you feel today, or how are you doing today, with good or fine? When you had anything, you felt nothing like it. Most of us probably have. And it's hard because it's breaking out of that isolation. But we need to do it because isolation actually increases anxiety, depression, and blocks the way for healing. Now, a recent study by the University of California shared that 3 out of 4 entrepreneurs deal with mental health issues. That's a huge problem. So we need to open up as entrepreneurs and people to have these conversations about emotions. Obvious perhaps, but hard in practice and essential for healing. Now this leads me to part 2, which is about language. There's 34,000 words to describe our emotions, and yet the average person has the emotional vocabulary of about 10. So grab a thesaurus, because understanding language helps you have power over it. Take grief. Now, I suffered a lot from grief and other challenges of emotions when I was trying to figure out and understand my feelings after failure. And by knowing grief, however, and by calling out the word, I was able to identify and research how others deal with it. I could take it out of myself and say, this is grief. That's all it is. Damn, does it hurt? But I know it for what it is, and I now know ways to deal with it. I no longer was subject to its physiological effects and emotional effects. I could control them, and the word became less permanent. Which leads me to storytelling as well, because storytelling is how we create narratives around how we make sense of things. Often, our subconscious will actually sabotage our healthy thoughts for ourselves when we're failing and going through emotional trauma. Why is it that we can be so compassionate and loving to others who are suffering, but we can't extend the same thing to ourselves? We really need to get better at self-talk. And this leads me to my third piece, around being very intentional about how we learn from failure. Dr. Dean Shepard shares that in order to deal with emotional trauma and still be able to learn from it, we need to be able to oscillate between confronting our failure and our emotions and distracting ourselves from it. And in doing this, we can actually learn from things without being overwhelmed. So how would we do this, you'd say? Well, there's a few simple structures. A failure postmortem or a failure audit, where you take blame, shame, and ego out of the equation and you look objectively at the planning, preparation, and execution of your situation, you can then ask questions like, what did I learn? And how can I apply these lessons next? And when the emotions rise up, have some fun, take a break, revisit a hobby that you love, or get together with friends, because offering to help them and offering to be part of that breaks isolation and gives us purpose. And when the emotions fall down again, you can revisit that failure if it's not already resolved. Now, failure in learning can be a desert walk, and it's important to take the self out of the equation. It's not about you, it's about what's happened. Reset and make sure that you don't put your identity into that issue. Start small with things that create joy or helpful and positive, like enjoying or spending time to think about 3 items of joy every day in a journal. And finally, be your own superhero. Invest in yourself, whether it be a coach, a course, or healthy living. Often, when we're failing and hurting, we push away the things that are most important to us when we actually need them the most to improve our physical and mental health, such as sleep. People recover from failure in different ways, whether you're an entrepreneur or not. Remember to lean into your emotions. Remember to be clear on your language and be intentional in how you learn, and you will get to the other side. Now, I started my journey broken, blind, and alone. And the hardest journey was the journey inwards, where I was forced to confront my old self in order to become the new self I am today. So if you are suffering, please reach out to somebody that you love or to an organization that can help. Get involved in the community and join us to be a story. My mission as Failed for Failure is to help those who have fallen rise to be their best selves as they move towards their new self. Thank you very much.